use all the HTML that we've been looking at, right, to implement some part of our assignment. In particular, we're going to look at the user admin. We're going to use tables for implementing the header for the table that is going to hold a list of our users. Right, we're going to have the table wrapping this whole thing, right? That contains several header and then several rows for each one of the users, and then several columns for the username, first name, last name, and whatnot. Okay. All right. So let's see. Where did we leave off yesterday? Right. I believe we had implemented a server, a Java server. Right. Summer 1. Let's go into web dev. And I believe we had ran this, right? Java jar, and inside of target we had deployed it in there. There it is in the jar file that we can execute, and then it listens to port 8080. All right, so let's see if we go to localhost. We had that welcome to Web Dev Summer 1 2019. Very good. All right, so let's work a little bit on that. Let's open it up with let's see, what do we want? Say IntelliJ, or actually WebStorm. And let's open up that project and see what can we do there. And let's see, let's close this project and let's open up the project we created yesterday. So let's open, and I believe we put it under Web Dev 2019 Summer 1, and there it is. It's this one, right? So let's open that up. And in here, under source, right, we have main, and our web app is here, right? This is our index. This is our landing page that we worked on yesterday. So we're going to create here a directory where we're going to create all our components, right? So perhaps components. You might create here different services so that we can talk to the server. Any models that we might have that might represent users might go under the models directory. It's a good idea to put to grab things that are alike and put them together, right? And also another way that you can organize things are by feature, right? So for instance, the login page might be a feature, the registration might be a feature, and you can group it that way as well. For user admin, let's create an admin folder here, and in here we'll create a file, and this will be maybe user admin dot template dot client dot html, and let's add this to Git. Yep. And in here for now, let's create an H1 where we have user admin and the table that we want to get started on, right? And let's see, where do we have it? There we go. So I'm just going to copy this. And I'm going to close that table. That's the head, and that's the table. The table is made up of a couple of portions, right? We have the head that's going to be displayed at the top. Then you have a body that's going to contain the main content, and you can also have a footer. Okay, which most of the time I don't use footers, but the header is mostly the what it sounds like. It's the head of the table with all the headings. So we can run that to see what that looks like. Okay, right now it looks ugly, right? We can change the width to be 100%. Right, so it takes up the entire width of the page, and we can also change the border to be, thick and ugly. For now, we don't have any styling yet, right? We don't have bootstrap. We don't have anything like that. We'll add that as we go along. Let's see. we're going to leave the last column. We're going to leave empty so that we can fill in like controls, right? Controls that we can use for editing, deleting, updating, selecting, and things like that. We'll leave that last column empty. All right, let's see what else. We could also use add a row that we can use for adding a form so that we can interact with this content. Right, so we have the table row. In the same head, right, we can have another row. There it is. Here's the row in the same head, and several input fields for the form that we are creating, right? So if we load that again, let me close that. Right, there it is. So we have an input field here for the username, the password, the first name, last name. The username, notice that it's just a plain text. The password is still a plain text. A good practice is to, again, give it the right type. Notice that the input field, by default, is just plain text, right? So it's allowing me to type just plain text in the username, right? That's the default type. For the password, we're going to be a little more rigorous. We're going to say that the type is going to be password. There it is. And now when we refresh, now notice that it hides whatever we are typing. All right, so first name, we're going to leave the default. Notice that I'm adding white spaces here to make it easier to read to my fellow developers. Right? Remember, the source code doesn't belong to you, right? It belongs to the team. Whatever you can make to make it easier for everyone else to consume your content, the better, right? We want the team to work more efficiently. So same thing with select. I'm going to just make this a little easier to read. And so there is some formatting here. I don't know that I have a style sheet, a style installed. There it is. So there's select. We left the input fields to be the plain text. Also notice the placeholder. The placeholder are just hints of what it is that you want me to write. Right? So first name is there. It gives me a height. It disappears when I start typing, and then it comes back when it's empty. Faculty, we have these options. But ideally, I would also have a value here with some token that might be meaningful to the server, right? So I'll always use some token. If you don't use a token, the default value is what is being displayed, right? But it's better practice to always use a value along with this. Also notice the is input is of type date. That means that I can select and it'll give me the correct widget to select the date. And at the end we have a buttons here. Okay. All right. What else do we want? We probably want also some actually dummy data for some folks in the body. So let's grab that in the body. Let's put it here in the body. Let's paste that, and we can format it. Code. Where's the reformat code? Okay, so it looks prettier now, right? So it's adding the wait, where'd it go? What? Did it reformat or did it remove my content? Oh, okay, it just copied. Did I copy and paste the right thing? Copy. And let me paste that in there. I think I have an extra table. And let me format that. Code, reformat code. All right, there we go. So that's better to read. If we refresh, there we have Alice and Bob. All right. Again, some password that is not shown. Alice, first name, last name. We have the faculty, and we have a delete and edit. And this is all static. Right? This is all static, and what we'd like to be able to do is to sense and interact with the data with a server to add new users, to remove or edit existing users. And we'll do that a little later when we do JavaScript next week. I'm still thinking this is spring and fall. At the end of tomorrow, we'll do some JavaScript. We'll start making this dynamic. All right. Wow, this is way too fast. Okay, so there we go. So we have the beginnings of what an administration page might look like. Let's also work on a couple of other pages here. Let's maybe work on the login. Right? We'll create a directory just for the login feature. and we'll create a page for there as well. So this will be login dot template dot client dot HTML. Okay, and in here we can start styling this and say that this is login, right? And in login, what the assignment says to do is to have a couple things there, right? We might have an H1 for the sign-in, some labels for the username and password, some input fields. So let's do that. Let's get started with that. So let's see, login, we might have a username. So username, maybe the input field here. Please. It's very distracting. So we have the input field here with Alice there. So this might be a good idea to uniquely identify your fields using the ID. ID means that I am uniquely identifying this field in this page, right? So presumably I should not be able to use username anywhere else on the page, right? Not that the browsers would care or enforce any of that, but nevertheless it's a good practice, right, to make it unique. Then you have username, we have the password with the input field as well here with the, again, the ID to be password. Also the type might be password as well. Good practice to put things in separate lines just to make it easier for other folks to read. And then we need a button, so we'll create a button here. So we'll say button, and this is login. And maybe some hyperlinks here, so href to forgot password, which doesn't exist, but let's since we're not going anywhere, we're just going to put a hash, meaning stay in this page, don't go anywhere, right? But still highlight it as a hyperlink. This is forgot password, and then we have sign up. Sign up or register. Presumably, we might actually build register, and register probably is going to go up and then down into a register directory which doesn't exist yet, and navigate to a page that doesn't exist yet that will be called register.template.client.html. Okay, all right, let's see what this looks like. We run it, and it looks awful, right? It's terrible. Nevertheless, we can do some improvements. Just plain old HTML. One of the things what we might want to do here is put a placeholder and give an example of what we're expecting folks to type in here. Maybe use some username that is very common in your culture. It might be Joe, and for password we're not going to use a placeholder there. The other best practice might be that notice that this becomes highlighted only when I click on the input field, nowhere else. Right, nowhere else. But since we're going to make this responsive, and we want this to be usable in a phone, a good practice is to associate the label here with the input field, so that when I click on the label, I also click on the input field, right? So they're somewhat related to one another, right? So to do that, we're going to use a label here. We're telling that this username is a label, and it's a label for the username. See that? Right? That means that now if I refresh, if I click on Joe, obviously that highlights, but if I click on username, also it highlights. See that? It increases the clickable area, right, for the which is a good practice, especially on a phone and small screens. You want to make it easier so folks can easily navigate through. Same thing with the password. I'm going to leave that up to you. Also notice that here we want to add some vertical spacing. One way to do that is to use BR, right? And that certainly works, right? But it's considered to be bad practice. Yes?
So kind of pass a little bit when you mean the register button, it's saying we're going to link to like a registered file to be a register above,
Yep.
directory above.
Yep.
Would, in general, how do you decide when to have like two files within one directory? If they're like, how do you decide if they're related enough to functions or separate directories?
Yeah, so if they are working on the same feature, then it's best to put them in the same feature folder, right? If indeed they're working on separate features, then it should be in separate folders. Now, on that one folder, we might have a whole bunch of other things in there, right? We'll have the login, we'll have a styling sheet that is specific to that page. We might have also a JavaScript controller that is specific to that page, right? And anything that's specific to that feature would go under that one. Unless there's something that is common, then we put it in some other place that is common to all the folks.
Okay. So you'll have multiple file types and one features.
Yes. Yep. Yep. Yes.
This technically just a school assignment, and we're not like trying to actually make a real thing with this besides just going through the assignment. Can we arrange the folder directory to be per assignment? Basically, anything related to assignment 1 would be in a folder called assignment 1, and then anything that like in just subdirectories for each
Nope.
features.
No, so what we're going to do is that we're going to use GitHub for that, right? So GitHub, you'll complete assignment 1. You'll push that to GitHub and you label it assignment 1, and then you'll just continue to assignment 2, right? And so we'll use GitHub to manage the versions, right? Of which is assignment 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Everything will build on each other, right? So you don't need to wait for assignment 1 or anything like that. You can just continue. Okay? Yep. Right. So notice that I've used BR for breaking up the page into a vertical spacing. And that's a bad practice. Do not use BR for that. BR is for mostly if you're breaking up things that only for things that naturally would need a new line, maybe like an address where you have like a first and second street address, and then zip code and state and whatnot, and then you need to do BR. If you want to break it up just for visual content. For logical breakup, typically we use either div or some other mechanism to add vertical spacing, right? So for instance, div there, we can use div over here. That adds vertical spacing. So div are used for those kinds of vertical spacing. For the login, we might also add some additional spacing here, div, which allows you to provide some logical breakup of the content of the page. Make sense? All right. It looks horrible. So instead of using just the default style sheet, this is an actual style sheet, right? It's this default style sheet that all browsers support, and they make an effort to look the same all across all the browsers. So all the browsers are using Times New Roman. They all notice add an 8-pixel padding all around the page, right? They all agree on the size of that H1. They all agree on square. Square corners for all the input fields and so on and so forth. Yes? So they all agree it's a standard. We can override that using a style sheet. Right? So let's talk about CSS a bit.